has completely changed in the last few days. And did anyone see this coming? Toby?
No, this is a real surprise. So the big story is that Magdalena Andersson, the Swedish Prime Minister, resigned, or is about to resign, and conceded defeat in last weekend's election. And it looks like the centre-right parties have done just fractionally better than the centre-left parties. So,
and the effect, it means that we have a right-wing coalition now in Sweden.
We have a right-wing coalition in Sweden, and we have we're going to have a right-of-centre Prime Minister. And the really dramatic news is that the Sweden Democrats, who until now have been kind of like the UKIP of Sweden, a very small right-wing party who people accuse of being racist and xenophobic and make a big noise about immigration and crime, have done surprisingly well. And they're now the second largest bloc.
To what extent is that accurate? I'm asking because I don't know. This article talks about how the origins of that party are neo-Nazi. They have neo-Nazi roots. Yeah, so that strikes me as a step beyond a UKIP. A closer comparison might be the BNP.
Well, I think they've moved away from their far-right origins and have become much more respectable.
So in the way that Marine Le Pen has changed the Front National.
I think that's probably a more accurate analogy, yes.
OK, I understand. What do you think of this, Nick? Because it was a surprise, but then at the same time, is it that much of a surprise? Because there have been certain issues that, shall we say, have been neglected by the Swedish government.
Yes, and in that sense, it's been going for a long time. And I read a long Twitter thread on this the other day. Perhaps I won't quote the stats in case we can't source them, but the stats on certain crimes to do with immigrants in Sweden, let's say, are absolutely shocking. So we're at the point now where, for many years, people have sort of been called racist if they mention immigration. But we're at the point where now it has to be addressed because the Prime Minister's resigning and admitting that it's been a failure and talking about the emergence of these parallel societies. And she did find a way to still imply that it was somehow Sweden's fault with this bizarre quote where she said, society has been too weak, as if somehow Swedish society is too weak to incorporate any kind of culture from around the world. But obviously the whole thing is it just doesn't work.
But there has been a correlation between the gang violence and the bombs, grenades and etc. with the ghettos that have had the immigrant communities within them. And that's not a racist thing to observe. This is true, isn't it?
No, I think it's true, and that's the reason the Sweden Democrats have done so well, I think, in this election. I mean, the big issues for them were gang violence, immigration, these parallel communities seemingly sitting outside Swedish society and ignoring Swedish laws and Swedish tradition, Swedish culture. There was a fatal shooting amidst some gang violence recently, in which an innocent bystander was caught in the crossfire, including one case with a young mother and her 5-year-old son. So it was a bigger issue in the election than the economy and the cost of living was.
I mean, this is fascinating to me. So I did contact a Swedish friend of mine who's left-leaning, would never vote for the right and didn't vote for the right. But he says people are horrified. People who are horrified now have done nothing about shootings, honour killings, kids getting robbed. We've had big Middle Eastern clan fighting in the streets, between 50 and 70 people kicking each other in the head. And the progressive woke people just pretend it's business as usual. He says, of course, I hate populism and right-wing parties, but no one else dares to tackle reality, hence the result.
Well, I think it's an argument that people like you and me have been making for a long time, rather than demonise politicians and political parties who raise the alarm about gang violence, immigrant crime and so forth. Let's have a conversation about it. But by demonising them and trying to push them outside, polite discourse, you just end up fueling these far-right parties.